Thanks, Gary. Appreciate the intro, and thanks everybody for your time and tuning in. I appreciate your interest in QSC and want to make this as worthwhile as possible. I definitely have a group of products that are really are offering for the hospitality world. We call it the business music solution. And by business music, we mean music is definitely present in the system, but it might not be the primary focus. So these are not systems for a performing arts center or a live music venue. This is for a restaurant or a bar or a hotel lobby or a retail store, places that have background music, but it's really secondary to that function of the space. So gonna talk a lot about the concepts and what makes sense for that market. We're gonna do that based around a variety of products from QSC. So we will dive into some specific QSC part numbers, but want to make this useful. So if there are questions you have as we get to things like, should I use a 70 volt amplifier or an 8 ohm or a 4 ohm, or are there amplifiers that do both, or just more sort of, I guess, generic but topical to that application, those kind of questions, please feel free to ask. Want to get as much useful information to you as possible in the next, I'd say 45 minutes or so. Definitely going to leave some time for Q&A at the end. Tom, appreciate you fact checking us on when the K.2 series was released. I definitely like the idea of maybe Gary, you can just be my like instant, what do they call that during a political debate? Just chime
the moderator,
in with,
hey.
Yeah. Keep me on track if I'm getting too off on specifications or whatnot. So
well, guys like Tom will keep us honest. Trust me.
Yes, because I have tried to cram all of the relevant part numbers and specs into my head, but then my dyslexia can start to play tricks on me. So as Gary mentioned, there's going to be a follow-up. So everything you're going to see today, you will get sent. So no need to take screenshots or, intense amount of notes. Of course, you're welcome to if you'd like. And there are going to be a couple of pieces of software. I'm going to mention everything from a software standpoint that you're going to see today is free and available to download from the QSC website. So you'll get those links as well. With that, I think I'll jump right in.
Great.
And let's see here. We'll do some screen sharing.
Yep.
Okay, hopefully this is coming through.
Yep.
Awesome. So the QSC Premium Business Music Solutions. This was a great presentation developed by the marketing team. There is a little, bit of a marketing flavor to it. So I'm going to move relatively quickly through some sections here. But again, please stop me at any point if you want to know more about a certain topic. Just a quick overview on who QSC is. Today, we serve a few different markets. We are a very, very large supplier of processors, amplifiers, and loudspeakers in cinema applications. That's all the way up to, an AMC 30 or a Regal Cinema multiplex, all the way down to kind of screening rooms, high-end editing suites, have seen our products used in some large kind of home theater applications. So that market, of course, has been challenged for the last, year or so, but we hope to be back in cinema soon. Also, we are a very popular brand in kind of the mobile entertainer, DJ, live sound, event production world. That's our K series, which might be the most kind of household name of any of our products, something like a K10 or a K12. It's what you see in the middle here. We're not going to touch too much on those, except I want to just say right off the bat that the systems we're going to talk about, you can certainly use a high volume, high output powered loudspeaker like a K series with some of the zone mixers we're going to talk about. If you're not going for background music, but you're really going for that kind of live, big present sound, maybe sports bar application, maybe outdoor venue. So we are a very well-known and trusted brand when it comes to live PA. Also themed entertainment. So for anyone here in Southern California, QSC has been the backbone of Disneyland, SeaWorld, Legoland, Knott's Berry Farm for their distributed audio systems. Our initial networked audio systems were developed basically for the cruise ship and themed entertainment world. So we've been doing the kind of distributed audio on a large scale for a very long time, 12, 13 years now. And what we're going to talk about today is kind of bringing that down into a bit of a smaller scale for a venue like a simple bar or restaurant. So again, just to highlight what we think of business music, we have a nice partnership right now with BJ's. I know that's very popular out here in California. I'm not sure how far they extend through the rest of the country, but kind of family pizza shop, background music kind of system. You see some of our pendant speakers hanging up there. Also, fitness gyms is a big market for us because they are customers who want kind of a rock and roll feel sometimes. So they're going to borrow from something like a K series, but they need kind of basic distributed audio throughout, kind of a 4-zone, 6-zone system. And then just traditional, kind of hotel, lobby, bar, that kind of world. QSC, when we introduce products into a category, we like to introduce them as a product family. So in this case, a zone mixer, an amplifier, and some specific background music loudspeakers. These were all introduced as a family, but these do not need to be required. You don't have to use an Mpa amplifier with an MPM mixer. You don't have to use these sub-sat surface speakers or ceiling speakers with these amplifiers. You can mix and match any QSC amplifier, any QSC loudspeaker with the zone mixers. But this together is going to make what we think is a good solution for a background music system. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what we mean by kind of background versus foreground in a little bit. So this is the family that makes up the business music solution from QSC. And we're going to dive into each one of these in just a little bit. Here's where we get into some of the marketing side, which I'm going to honor, but move quickly through. Here are basically our objectives for something like this. We want it to be architecturally pleasing. It's got to look good. These systems exist in a space where the customers can see them. So it's got to, it's not a black box theater where you're not going to see, or a cinema application where you don't actually see the sound reinforcement system. So it's got to look good. We've got a wide catalog. We're not going to touch on every QSC loudspeaker or every QSC amplifier today, but we go amplifiers very, very small and low power all the way up to very, very big and high power. Same thing on the loudspeaker side. Really important, something we will talk about quite a bit today is fast installation and configuration. Our pitch with these systems is that it is easy for you, the integrator, to get up and running. Time is money. The faster you can get into the job site and out and get the customer to sign off and pay that invoice, the happier everyone is going to be. So a lot of things within the system are designed with your speed of installation as the objective. And then the user experience. So most people tend to hear their system by how easy it is to control their system, right? Their app experience is synonymous with their experience of the system. So we want something that is easy and intuitive for a non-AV professional. You're likely handing this to the reception or person behind a desk at the hotel, or bar manager who doesn't have an AV background. So it's got to be easy for them to use. Okay, just some more about how things look. We do have black and white options for the loudspeakers. Same thing with the wall controllers. These MFC or multifunction controllers that you see here, these are the only things that are specific to the MPM mixers. These controllers, MFC controllers, will only work with the QSC MPM mixers. MPM, by the way, is music and paging mixer, as opposed to MPA, music and paging amplifier. And this is an MFC or multifunction controller. I'm really going to try to nail all the acronyms today. Weatherize, want to mention here, our passive series of loudspeakers. The acoustic design or AD loudspeakers are IP rated, so they can be used indoor or outdoor. Basically, IP rated up to, but not including submersible. So if you're going to, be on the side of a cruise ship, literally getting smashed with the wave of water, this is not the loudspeaker for you, but this is perfectly fine to be outdoors in the rain, permanently mounted, no problem there. So really all you've got to not do is point your loudspeaker straight up at the sky, in which case the rain would collect in the speaker itself. Other than that, go ahead and mount it outdoors, no problem. Code compliance. So this is an important one to be aware of. The loudspeakers, everything you're going to see here is UL rated, and we have fire alarm integration on the NPM and Mpa. So the California building code, and I imagine this is common anywhere in the country, your background music system needs to be able to shut down in the event that the fire alarm is tripped, right? We can't have the music keep playing to obscure the fact that the fire alarm is going off. So your system needs to be able to react to that fire alarm trigger, and ours can, as well as UL compliance for our loudspeakers, which we have. So there's a lot more documentation on that. If you've got a GC or a client that really wants to see this stuff, we can provide that to you. Designer assets. So full library of the ease files. I'm going to show a little bit at the end, a couple of pieces of software that are free. You can download them on the QSC website. QSC does not develop the software itself. The ease focus and ease address is developed by another company, but we provide our loudspeaker profiles so that you can design a space and see how our loudspeakers are going to react in a venue of a given size. Very helpful for proof of concept and basically showing your customer why 2 loudspeakers won't work as well as 6 loudspeakers, because you want even coverage through a system. The goal of any background music system is to be consistent. We don't want to walk throughout a space and feel like the volume is going up or down simply because we're under a loudspeaker or not. So often that's the conversation we're having with an end user, where their question might be, why do we need so many loudspeakers? Because we need uniform coverage, a piece of software that helps demonstrate that graphically. Small amplifiers. We're going to talk a little bit more about these, but this is the Mpa Amplifier series, which is a full rack width but single RU height. So factory voicing, this is where we start to talk about the value of using QSC loudspeakers with QSC amplifiers with QSC processing. So we have what we have trademarked called Intrinsic Correction, which is, we believe our loudspeakers sound good right out of the box, but we know exactly how our loudspeakers sound best, and we know exactly when our loudspeakers would break up should they be pushed to certain volumes at certain frequencies. So we have built in the speaker profiles for any QSC loudspeaker into the NPM mixers so that you get the best possible sound out of your loudspeaker, and a layer of protection so that if your customer tries to turn that volume up to 11, the intrinsic correction will make sure that nothing is pushed too far so that the components in the loudspeaker don't become damaged due to overuse. So this is where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I always mix that phrase up. So you get these with the NPM mixers. Certain QSC amplifiers also have these built in, just FYI. That would be like our CXD or PLD amplifiers, where you get some added DSP, including the intrinsic correction for the loudspeakers. The Mpa amplifiers, which we're going to talk about, do not have any DSP. So that is an analog amplifier. So you need the loudspeaker voicings to come upstream from the amplifier, and that is from the NPM mixer. Also just helps make commissioning your system that much easier, because you're not doing, room correction to make that loudspeaker work to begin with. You're starting from a great place with a good sounding loudspeaker right off the bat. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about everything on this slide, so I'm going to move pretty quickly here, unless there are any specific connections. But yes, the connection points on the back of MPM, you're using the Euro block style connectors for the balanced input, so you get a plus minus ground. And then you've got RJ45, which you're going to use for Ethernet, which is what I'm doing to configure the system. We're going to walk through this, as well as connecting the MFC controllers. Okay, a little bit more about how to control your system. We're not talking about Qsc today. There are a lot of questions that might come up about what the MPM mixers can or can't do. Trust that if there's something an MPM can't do, then that is a function Qsc could do. Qsc is kind of the more advanced version of the MPM system. Comes at a higher cost, you get a little more with it, but that is a topic for another day. Okay, really quickly here, because I don't think you'd be tuning in if you didn't think there was value in providing background music, but here is some kind of data on the industry about what happens to consumers when they are in a retail or hospitality environment where background music is present. Basically, they have a more positive opinion of their experience in that location. They tend to stay longer. They tend to drink more. They tend to buy more. All of this has been studied right down to the tempo of the music and what is most likely to get you to linger in a place. All kinds of information here. So moving very quickly, suffice to say that people like it when there's music playing. Okay, so let me do time check. Okay, want to keep moving unless there's any questions. Gary, should I pause at all?
Yeah, well, Dave Hurley had a question about volume matching or volume. I don't know if that came from an earlier slide, but here, let me just throw it at you really quick. He's asking, and thank you, Dave, does the volume control need to match the load? And if the control is too high, will that load up the amp? His problem was that he had an ISA 450 bridge totaling 900 watts, serving 6 zones with about 25 watts per speaker per zone. And the issue was he had 100-watt volume controls on each of those zones. So.
Gotcha. So that perfect. That actually worked out. Almost never goes this way. So that is exactly the segue into this topic, which I'm about to mention, how you control the outputs per zone. So traditionally, and this is what this slide is actually diagramming here, is you would have an output of an amplifier going through some sort of attenuator in line with the voltage going out to the loudspeakers. And then as you attenuate, turn down that volume control, what you're really doing is just choking down the amount of current being delivered to the loudspeakers. And that's effectively how you're making your zone level adjustment is basically post amplifier. So a high voltage run down that cable before it hits the loudspeakers. Our preference here in the business music system now is, rather than attenuating the signal once it's left the amplifier, that we want to instead, and you see these little blue dotted lines here, the wall control is actually wired back to the head end, and we are manipulating the volume in the mixer before it gets to the amplifier. So there is nothing between the amplifier and the loudspeaker. Yes, if I can remember, let me just make sure I literally answered Dave's question. If you are putting the attenuator after the amplifier, yes, it is ideal if it matches the load of the total load of the loudspeakers on that amplifier channel. Our recommendation for what it's worth, kind of moving forward, is to not do that at all, is to use the MFC to control the mixer, so you don't even have to get into that question or that issue that comes up when you're dealing with the wattage of the attenuator versus the wattage needed downstream in the loudspeakers on that amp channel. So in that particular question, you had 900 total watts, 25 watts per zone times 6 zones. So you had plenty of headroom on your amplifier, but using 100-watt volume controls. So yes, I believe what was happening in that particular example was that because the volume control was of such a greater wattage than what was downstream, that by percentage, as you were attenuating the signal, you were likely, well, I don't know what the symptom was that you were hearing, but if the volume control was maybe too aggressive or was not basically kind of in a nice range of kind of turning the volume down equally through the range of the volume attenuator, that question kind of highlights the problems with trying to do attenuation per zone post amplifier. It was how we did things for a long time because it was the only way available, certainly the most cost-effective way. For all those complicated reasons, we think it is better, if possible, because there is a little more cost with this way of doing things, to control the mixer itself to attenuate a zone volume so that the amplifier and the loudspeakers, there's nothing in between them except cabling. And I should say, while this is a little more expensive up front, because we're just using, I believe it is a 485 protocol, so it's not actually Ethernet. So we get up to 250 meters of cable to get to an MFC controller. But we're comfortable leaving that in place for years and years and years. Whereas the kind of the inline attenuators, they tended to have a shelf life of, 2 or 3 or 5 years because they were just getting hit with so much voltage from the amplifier, it would degrade over time. So we do think that total cost of ownership going with the MFC route will be a little less expensive over time. Sorry, total long explanation there. I hope that was helpful in some way. It does kind of highlight our strategy with the background music systems. Kind of our recommendation now going forward is to try, if at all possible, to control volume through the mixer before the amplifier. Oh, let's get back into here. Okay. Just some real quick back panel stuff on the NPM, and we're going to get right into the NPM on how to configure it real quick. NPM 40, NPM 80. So the 40, you've got 4 mic line inputs, 4 RCA stereo inputs that are internally summed to mono, and then 4 line level outputs. So 4, 4, and 4. NPM 80 is exactly double that, 8, 8, and 8. 2 GPI or general purpose inputs, plus a dedicated music on hold output. So you don't need to burn one of your line outs if you want your house background music system to also feed your music on hold. The 2 MFC ports, so a total of 8 MFC wall controllers can be connected to 1 MPM, but you've got to do that in 2 home runs of 4. So daisy chained from units 1 to 4, connecting to a single MFC port on the back. And then the second MFC port can daisy chain home run out to unit 5 and then daisy chain to 6, 7, 8. And then the Ethernet port is where you can hardwire, which is what I'm doing today, to configure the system through a Windows piece of software, or you can put this with on the Wi-Fi system and do your install configuration from a tablet app, which is very helpful as you're walking around setting up your zones. You don't have to be in a rack and go walk out, make sure things sound good, come back in, make adjustments. You can do everything from the tablet app. The Q bus. So if you are in the rack, what can be helpful is just to headphone monitor and make sure you got healthy signal coming in from all your inputs before you go out and check all your zones. So that's just kind of a handy thing to have. The USB port, very helpful. You can store and recall presets. So if you want to commission, 20, I don't know, Old Navy stores, and you've got the configuration file that's going to basically get you 90% of the way done, you can send that out with a technician and, products that is new in the box with the USB drive, plug in the USB, do a recall, which I'll show you how to do, and basically have that unit fully set up. You can play audio through the USB port. We have to stipulate that this is not a way to play background music in the system, because there is no licensing being paid if you're just putting files on a thumb drive and playing it. So it's there for testing purposes, so you can put music through the system just to tune up the zones, but you should legally pay for a music streaming service that is on the back end sorting out all the licensing and royalty fees. So little disclaimer there. Again, the wall controls, and there is a smartphone app. This can be used simultaneously, but just be aware if somebody's walking over and pressing volume up on the wall and somebody's on the app pressing volume down, you are controlling the same zone, right? So you both have access at the exact same times. We're going to talk more about the app in a little bit, but you can customize what users have access to which features. Same thing with the wall controls. And I'm going to move a little quickly here, but again, please stop me at any point. So from the app, we can control a certain zone. We can select a source for that zone. We can make volume adjustments for that zone. We can have the ability to control multiple zones, depends on what you give that user. A person with the app can schedule events. So if you know that every Monday night, during football season at 7 p.m., you want the direct TV feed for Monday Night Football to go all throughout the facility, you can schedule that event to happen. You can define a scene. Those kind of go in tandem, right? So a scene is a state of all settings in the mixer, like which sources are selected for which zones and what volume are those zones at. So you can set up a scene and then schedule a scene to occur, excuse me. Security, so who has access to the apps, to the system, what users of the apps have what permissions. So all that can be set up. Mixer control, we're going to talk about the mixer in a little bit. And wireless paging. Okay, so real quick here, you see that paging little button there at the bottom. You can, if your MPM mixer is on the Wi-Fi and your user's got an app and their phone is on the Wi-Fi, you can send a page into the system using the microphone on your phone. So the app is basically recording your page, packetizing it, sending it over the network to the MPM mixer, which is then distributing it as a page for whatever zone you select. So you've kind of got a paging system as soon as you get the MPM mixer right off the bat. You can add dedicated paging microphones, of course, and I'll show you how to set up the paging for those zones, but you've got it in the app itself. Okay, we're going to take a look at the actual install software in a sec, but again, just to highlight, you can do it from a Windows PC or a tablet, and we're going to go through all of these things in real time. So I'm just going to very quickly go through all these slides because we're going to see it. And maybe now is the time I do that. So Gary, did any other questions come in?
Kirk De Los Santos was asking a question about the zone controllers right back a couple of minutes ago, but really quickly, he was asking, do the zone controllers need to be daisy chained?
Yes. So you have 2 ports on the back of the MPM. And then if you go from an MFC port on an MPM mixer has to do a home run to the first MFC controller, which then can daisy chain to up to 3 more on that run. So you can have 4 wall controls per MFC port on the back of an MPM mixer for a total of 8 in 2 runs of 4 daisy chained.
Perfect.
So there are plans to have a solution for more of a star topology, but not right now.
And Dan's question, is there a HIB for the MFCs, or do they have to be jumps?
I don't know what HIB means.
Maybe he means hubs. Hub? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. So again, yeah, there is no hub. We're working on that. Smart people are trying to answer that question. But today, no, it goes in a run of 4 per port. So yes, if the layout of your venue is complicated to the point where you can't daisy chain from the bar to the pool area to the lounge, you have 2 home runs you can make from the back of the MPM.
Got it.
So bit of
And
an
then
asterisk there and an important one.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. And then Tom is asking, right as we're going into this next slide, about does the paging feature duck other inputs for the paging? I don't know if you're going to get into what the capabilities are of there. And
Cool.
also, when you said that, is there a record feature for you to do that as well, that you can throw that back out there?
So it does record. So it's not that's 2 good things. And one is a perfect transition. So again, thank you for the very timely questions, guys. It does record it. So it's not a live microphone in the system. So the good part about that is that it limits your liability for feedback issues, right? Because you don't have an open microphone right beneath the speaker that your page is coming out of. So it records within the app on your phone, sends that over Wi-Fi to the MPM. Once the MPM has that audio file, it plays it out into that zone. The gap there from when you record your page to when it plays is about 15 seconds.
No editing capability there. What if you had a big bunch of dead air at the end? Could you bring it back?
Correct. No editing ability. So it's like recording your outgoing voicemail message, right? You hit record, you say the thing, and then you got to hit it to say you're done, and that's what plays.
Got it.
If you prefer more of a push to talk style with like a dedicated microphone, we can do that too. But to edit, that would be because we do have people who will schedule automated pages, like for promotions running throughout the day or something. The best way to do that would be to record it separately and then through some sort of player, put that into a dedicated input so that it's on a loop, right? The 30-second page plays every 6 minutes, to let the hotel guests know that there's an event tonight. The best way to do that would be to record it ahead of time, put it into a device of some sort, and then wire that into one of the input channels. And then I'll show you how to route that input channel to a zone that will, yes, duck the audio in that zone.
Okay. Cool. About halfway point. Let's keep going.
Yeah, I'm going to go quick because, man, time really flies. Maybe I'm just rambling. Okay, so do you see my MP install app? Good there? Okay, I'm going to trust we are. So what I am doing here is I'm running Windows on a Mac, so that's a little complicated just on Mac Windows stuff, but I'm just networked to an NPM 80. And here by default, I am looking at our menu. So this is kind of just an overview page, but there is a really, really helpful thing called a setup wizard, which doing research before we launched this project, we found that many integrators, it might not be the head of engineering that goes out to deploy a background music system at a restaurant, especially if you're managing, a chain-wide retail or restaurant group, where you've got to deploy 20 places in a month. You're probably sending out a person who's capable of getting on a ladder and putting a speaker in the ceiling and racking up equipment. And maybe they also need to be responsible for commissioning the audio system. So the setup wizard is really just a way to make sure you've done what we think is everything you need to do to get a system fully operational. All this does is jump you to other places. These are just kind of hot links to get you to places that are under the input section or the outputs or in the menu. So there's nothing in the setup wizard you couldn't just get to in other places. But it is a very helpful checklist to just go through these 10 steps and to feel confident that you've commissioned the system. So let me answer the paging question directly, because that was a very good one and very important. And then we're gonna just jump down that setup wizard real quick. So I went into outputs, and here we see our output zones. Again, I'm on an NPM 80, so I have 8 output zones. And here I see sources. So the nice part in general about the NPM is that the DSP is all fixed. So if anybody is familiar with our Qsc system, Qsc is nice in that it can do almost anything, but you've got to build it basically from scratch. The MPM is a little more limited as opposed to being able to do everything, but it is still quite feature rich. And it's all the DSP architecture is put in place for you already. So just to go through the overview, so that just shows you everything that's happening with output zone channel number 1. So at a glance, this is kind of what's happening with that channel. But specifically, if I want to define its sources, so maybe I want to make input 1 and input 2 as available sources for zone 1. This would mean that if I walked up to an MFC wall control in zone 1, I would only have 2 available selections for the background music, whatever's coming on input 1, whatever's coming on input 2. I can put as many, I can give that zone up to 8 choices for background music sources. In this way, when you select one, you only get one playing at a time, unless you select the mixer, which the mixer can be a combination of a number of inputs. So a little more on that in a sec. So that's the selectable sources, which is in the middle here. The priority sources, this is where you set up the ducking. So let's say I wanted as a priority source the Wi-Fi paging for zone 1. So if somebody gets into their app, sends a page over Wi-Fi, how the source level is how loud is that input, in this case the Wi-Fi page, going to be. Override zone level, if you want it to affect the source audio that's playing, you click yes. If you click no, you'll still hear the page, but the source, the background music that's playing, would not be affected at all. So they'll be kind of simultaneous on top of each other. So if you want the ducking feature, you click yes. The threshold, right? So how low or negative it is versus how high. The threshold is as soon as the audio coming in from the paging source, in this case, the Wi-Fi paging, gets above this level, whatever you set it at, it will decrease the background music playing in that zone by the amount on this depth fader. So a low threshold means that it takes just a little bit of audio from that paging source to engage the ducker. And if you put the depth, let's say at 60 dB, so it's going to reduce the depth, it's going to reduce the volume of that background music in the zone by, in this case, 60 dB, effectively muting it. While the paging source is active. When the paging source falls back below the threshold, there is this hold time. This is the amount of time before the background music source for that zone comes back in. So let's say, for example, you've got the jukebox where there's house background music going through the zone 1 output. Unless somebody puts $1 in the jukebox, I don't even know if you put dollars in jukeboxes now that I think about it. It's probably a credit card. Regardless, when the jukebox is active, let's say they play 3 songs. Well, there it might be a gap of audio between song 1 and song 2 in the jukebox playlist. And you don't want the house background music to come rushing back in and then back out in between those songs. So if you set the hold time for 300 milliseconds, right, you're going to get a 300 millisecond buffer where the paging source, in this case, in this example, the jukebox, is still active even if its audio is below the threshold. So these kind of parameters is how you set up the ducking functionality per zone. So all of this can be done on a per zone basis. But yes, ducking is a major feature for these customers, and we've got it built in. Hopefully, once you get your head around kind of the terminology here, because certain manufacturers call these things, by different names. But this really is the complete setup for a paging source that will duck the background music for a given zone. You would then need to do this kind of per zone.
Yeah, it's good to hear, if you could, that those source levels too, right, Ross? Because what if you're getting handed, a very light source to begin with? Wouldn't that affect that first threshold knob you do, right? I mean, you want it to bounce in there pretty hard if it's pretty low coming in.
Right. So, and a combination of things there, right? So let's say you had a dedicated hardwired paging microphone input. Then you could go to that input channel and set up its gain, its EQ, its compressor, everything associated with that input, so you get the best possible signal going in. Now, there is still no cure for someone who backs away from the microphone and just doesn't have good mic technique. But yeah, so you can try to solve it on the input side and then again on the output side. So, and I'm sorry for the little lag time here. This is a Mac Windows thing. But their priority source under the source level, right? So you've got your input signal and then how much of that input signal comes into the zone. So you can add up to 15 dB of additional gain on top of whatever gain you've added on the input side. Or you can make it slightly lower than whatever you have it set coming on the input side. So yes, source level per zone, depth affects how much you attenuate the source per zone. Source level is for the paging source, how much you add or subtract based on what you've already done on the input side.
Good.
Okay, real quick, because gosh, we're getting short on time. The way you can save configuration files. This is helpful because I can save it to the piece of software I'm using. So if I go around with the same PC to commission every Trader Joe's I'm going to, then great. I can put it on a USB drive or I can save it internally to the NPM mixer itself. So lots of fail safes there, right? You can configure the NPM for a customer. You can save it internally in the NPM. You can hand them a USB drive and say, if something ever happens, plug in this USB drive and recall, the configuration file. And then you can walk away with your laptop having saved that as well. So lots of ways to kind of share files and get systems up and running there. We're not going to go through naming stuff, but just suffice to say, you can name all your inputs, you can name all your outputs. Anything you name them will populate on the app or the wall control. So if you want to call it, bar, lobby, whatever, that's all fine. Assigning sources, so that's what we were just looking at for the output zones. What sources are available per output zone? And again, that kind of thing is recallable. So if you have a scene where, maybe from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., the bar can only select from the house feed or the background music, or the bar has a local input. Those are the only two sources it can select from. But, from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m., you, for whatever reason, want to give them more source selections for that zone. So you can assign what sources are available per zone, and then that can adjust based on a scene recall. Loudspeaker tunings I mentioned, all the QSC stuff is built in there. Some of the input and output settings, I just want to mention a couple of helpful things coming in here. I'm on the input side now. So delaying the audio on an input channel. You may have a video matrix, right? You've got 6 different DirecTV set-top boxes, for NFL Sunday Ticket, and you're picking off the audio from each of those DirecTV boxes and plugging them into an NPM. Routing through a video matrix often has some delay associated. So if you need to add delay in your audio signal chain to match up with the delay inherent in your video distribution system, you can do that. That way you don't get the kind of old kung fu movie, out of sync thing happening. So again, very, very practical, that comes up very often with these kind of venues. If any of this looks familiar, if you've ever used the QSC touch mix before, you will find that the EQ and the dynamics processing is all borrowed from that platform. So pretty straightforward stuff here. Won't talk a lot about EQ and compressors and everything. Here are the touch mix presets. So if you've got a snare drum or whatnot, you're trying to set up an input channel for, we threw them in there because why not? It's pretty easy for us to do that. The thing that would be probably most helpful is just if you've got a dedicated microphone or something coming into the system. And again, this is just a preset to kind of help tailor the EQ style you need for that particular instrument. Real quick, because I know we're getting short on time. One other thing I wanted to mention on the output side, another very common thing. What amount of volume control do you give the end user? So this min max output. So they may want to go all the way up to 100%, but you can limit what their end user control, what range it is actually toggling between. So on the MFC wall control, it will still go from 0 to 100%, but within the bookends you define here. So if you never want them to be able to add plus 14 dB, to a given zone, which is a pretty hot signal, you can come in and limit it to -5. They might think they're maxing out the system. You and I know that they're within a safe range. So another great way to give the user the maximum control they think they want, but also protecting the system a little bit and knowing that it'll never get quieter than this range and it'll never get louder than this other range. One other, this gets a little esoteric, but this is called the Fletcher Munson equal loudness curves. All I want to say here is our ears, the way we perceive frequency response, we need more volume out of low frequencies to perceive them at an equal loudness to higher frequencies. So when you see these curves kind of bending up towards the lower frequencies, that means if I want to hear a sub that's playing, 60 hertz, I need that sub to be at a 40 dB output to be perceived as loud as a 1 kilohertz frequency at 10 dB, right? So a 30 dB increase on my low frequencies just to be able to hear them as equally loud as my mid-range or high frequencies. And I think we all know this intuitively. This is why as volume gets turned up, it starts to sound more full and more broad. And that's because our ears are hearing the low frequencies as you turn up the volume. All that we're trying to do here is give that to you in a single volume control so that as the system is going up and down in overall volume, the MPM mixer is keeping the weight equal so that as you turn the whole system down, all frequencies appear to turn down equally. We are using this kind of general phenomenon that happens with our ears and the loudness at certain frequencies to make the system appear to have full frequency response at all volumes. So that's a lot of kind of technical explanation, but the end result is that your customer will feel like the system is in balance at all volumes. So a lot going on here, and I'm certainly happy to answer most, any question when it comes up to how to program these things. I think what we're running out of time to probably dive into detail on is like how to set up the wall controllers. But as you can see it here, you've got, again, up to 8 controllers. Do they control one zone or multiple zones? Do they have the ability to recall scenes? So this is where you go to set that up. Same thing with the apps. So real quick on the security of the The app, because it is on a mobile device, so you can set up these profiles, manager, assistant manager, whatever it might be, and then what each profile has access to control in the system. And then when a new user logs in, you're going to approve that device and assign them a role. When Bob, the bartender, gets fired and you don't want him walking back into the Cheesecake Factory one day and opening up his app and, wreaking havoc on the system, right? You can remove a device from permission to access the system. So you've got a lot of flexibility here in what specific end users see when they open the MP Manage app. Last thing I'll say, then I'll turn it over to questions. MP install is what we're looking at now. Windows software and tablet. That is for configuring the system. MP Manage is tablet or Android or iOS smartphone app for control of the system day to day. So one for the integrator, one for the end user. All of those apps are at no cost, again, assuming you've got the NPM. Gary, I think you're going to follow up with pricing on all these things, so I don't need to comment on that unless you'd like me to. I certainly can.
No, it's available at all the SnapAV locals at this point. I love the system setup, and I love how we put this, together. Guys, let's got a couple more minutes for Ross for some questions right now. Hey, when you were just talking about locking out Bob, the bartender, what about a previous integrator? Does that ever come up? That you would need?
Well, so yes, once the integrator walks away, there is nothing locking out the customer from pulling the configuration file, changing the configuration file, right? So they own the design on the mixer at that moment. Now, if integrator number one gets access to the system, I mean, you can always not let them in the building, but there is no way once you've connected to the mixer, like I'm just physically hardwired to it, I can pull that configuration file. Mm-hmm. If the only way to get to it is through the house Wi-Fi, because you're doing the tablet version of the install app, I guess you can restrict them from the Wi-Fi network, if you don't want them coming back in and working on your system. But that's really between the end user and the integrator who owns the sort of intellectual property there.
Is there any additional templates, so to speak, that you guys give out other than what's already in the mixer and so forth?
There's nothing specifically, though. That would be where I or my counterparts across the country would help you. So if you're making your first go at this sort of thing, I will mention real quick, just with the time remaining, if you want to know more, let me share real quick. Sorry, lots of windows open. There it is. Here's a fun commercial I was going to play about a product we launched, as you can see, in February, called the Halo, which is like a sub with satellites built in. Tough time to launch a business music product last February. But anyways, if you want to learn more, training.qsc.com. There is a dedicated MPM series of courses. So if you want to go in and really dive into everything I talked about here, and you can go ahead and get certified if that's important to you, or else all of these are available on the QSC website, or I'm sorry, the YouTube page, which I believe if you just search MPM, you're going to find basically, the same tutorials as training.qsc in the YouTube page. And then here's just the website.
Got it. And somebody was asking us about, covering amplifiers and everything else. There's definitely another course that I can get together on and develop and get out in the next 6 weeks or so. I definitely want to expand on some of the topics we talked about other than the business music solutions. Yes.
And I apologize, guys, just got a lot to cover, but I will mention very quickly those Mpa amplifiers. So music and paging amplifiers, 2, 4, or 8 channel amplifiers. What is new about those is what we're calling flex amp technology. So for every pair of channels, outputs 1 and 2, you have 400 watts, and that 400 watts can be applied asymmetrically. So if you have, zone 1 is 4 ceiling speakers for the bathroom tapped at 5 watts each, and zone 2, maybe you want to, so that only requires 20 watts. Well, then on output channel 2, you get to use 400 minus 20, so 380 watts, let's say, to hit a subwoofer. So previously, right, you buy a multi-channel amp, you get a 4-channel amp, it does 250 watts per channel. And if one zone only needs 20 watts, then whatever, you had to dedicate a 250 watt amp channel to it. Now you don't. Each of the channels can be 8 ohm, 4 ohm, or 70 volt, and you get 400 watts per pair of channels. So as you get into these systems that inevitably, a hallway needs 8 speakers tapped at 7.5 watts. And then at the end of the hallway, there's a display with 2 surface mount speakers that need 300 watts. So great way to add a flexible amp to the system. What you're going to get from Gary, I have some system diagrams that just kind of illustrate, kind of basic venue types and what sort of loudspeakers and amplifiers we recommend. I can show those to you real quick. I've got them pulled up here, but we're 2 minutes from.
All right. Well, you know what? Hang on to that thought. I've got 4 guys right here. Let's do a lightning round really quick.
Yeah, lightning round.
Okay, Jake. Yes, we're gonna give the copy of this webinar out today, and also invite any of you guys back at 2 p.m. West Coast for the same session. Okay, Jake. Thank you. Evan had a couple going back to. Are there trigger inputs available for a ducker, fire alarm, etc.? Trigger inputs.
So you do have those 2 GPI inputs, and those are primarily for the fire alarm shutoff. If you want things like the ducker, that would have to be triggered from the MFC dedicated QSC product, the wall control. So there is also, I should say, an open API, because there is an Ethernet port. So if you do want to control it from a larger control system, you could do that as well. In the QSC world, because we also have QSys, which can be a control platform and an audio processor, we would suggest that just go that route if you need both audio and control. But maybe they got a pre-existing control system and they just want to add audio distribution, so you can do third-party control of NPM to trigger ducking.
Back before, when we were talking about saving the jobs, etc., Kirk had a question about was there that the ability to save that channel, that zone? You set up the zone, we did the ducker, save that zone, and then multiply it.
Well, there is a copy and paste, but not for source select necessarily. So for like if we look at that overview page where you see the EQ and the compressor and the dynamics, all that stuff, like TouchMix, you can copy and paste an EQ curve from one input to another or an output to another. The source selects, like if I know I always want these 3 sources across these 4 zones, you would have to go by zone and click them 1, 2, 3 each time. There is a helpful little button that just goes next. So if you're looking at zone output 1 and you make your source selects, you can just hit next, but you would have to click them again. Any of the lag time you see is because I'm having trouble running Windows on my Mac. If you're on a Windows native machine, it's pretty responsive and quick and easy.
Okay. All right. So Kirk, hopefully that answers that question. Talked about the amplifiers. Evan, so this can replace all our DBX Zone Pro 1260s?
So Dale, who is the product manager at QSC for this product, was on the original DBX team.
Oh, really?
So yes, this is very much what we consider the next evolution of that system. That is the nail on the head of this conversation, including the guy who developed both. Is the lead QSC product manager is a guy named Dale Sandberg, who you'll see if you look this up on YouTube, and he's done presentations for us before here through Snap. But exactly, couldn't have said it better myself.
Right on. Does 80% of max load rule apply? Rule of thumb apply to these amps, or can we max them out all the time?
Headroom is always a good thing. As the amplifier company and the amplifier guy, headroom is always good. headroom is less critical given the content. If your light background music and paging is not the same as heavy metal music at a concert venue. So if you're talking about a 70-volt run, down a hallway for background music, or it's less critical. I like that kind of 80-20, build in about 20% headroom. Headroom is never a bad thing. And the more critical, the more high output, the more dynamic the content, the more we think headroom is a good idea. But yes, exactly what was said, I would agree with.
Well, remember when we were talking about attenuating the input, and that one control, when you maxed it out, would that be the throat is completely open from the QSC standpoint? Like, feed me everything I got. There is no headroom.
Yes. So when we're talking about how much of an input is routed to the output zone as a paging source.
Yeah.
The fader in that case is 0, or nominal is exactly what it is set on the input stage. And then you have the opportunity to decrease it or increase it. But that's digital, right? That's after the preamp input and A to D conversion into the mixer. So on the input channel is like the first preamp gain knob on your mixer is where you're trying to set the level to get the healthiest signal in before clipping. Yeah. Then once you have that analog signal now in the digital domain, whether you add or subtract is just digital gain at that point. So it's to taste per zone.
Got it. And as Tom points out, distortion blows speakers way before power. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that, generally speaking, right. Yeah, we can, that's a fun topic too. That's a later one.
Eric, yes, everything's going to get the diagrams that he was talking about earlier. I will definitely put together an email, get all the links and everything, so forth. Ross, that was great. Kind of a lightning round. I'm really glad we covered that topic. We're going to duplicate this again at 2 o'clock West Coast. But judging from our 60 guys we had on there, I think everybody's ready for to continue this discussion and to continue to have us support these jobs going forward. I think it's very timely that you came in here and what these guys are going to be asked of in the next month.
And I apologize if we left some things out. An hour moves fast, even in a room talking by myself. So please let Gary know if I didn't get to a topic, because I'll have a chance to summarize some stuff before you get that email on Friday. And I want to get information to you.
Yep, absolutely.
So, thank you.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Again, 2 o'clock today. I will email everybody. Let's continue this conversation. Commercial is such a big priority for us. You're going to continue. Like I said, I would love a deeper amplifier dive with you. I will set that up. Guys, feel free to email me on certain topics, again, on how we want to kind of route this. Every Wednesday, we're doing this. Next week, I've got Sony. Okay, 4 sessions next week. And why I point that out, I'm giving away a 55-inch OLED, okay? And seriously, I'll probably have about 300, 400 people. So it's like 1 in 400. And you guys know me. I'm giving away a TV to our audience. Come join me next week, each and every week, Wednesday webinar series. I'm Gary from Volutone, of course, representing all SnapAV locals. Thank you so much for your business, you guys. We're doing great. Denver just opened. So did Salt Lake City, Scottsdale. Thanks from all my partners at MRI, AllNet, Custom Plus, and again, Volutone. SnapAV locals coming at you. Only here can you get trainings like this. Ross, thank you, buddy. Love to the family for me, bud. Okay. And let's get another course together in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And let's keep talking commercial with QSC.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
See you later, Ross. Bye, guys.